Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the mental health and physical well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reed.
And I'm your other host, Christian Myers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. If you're new here, there's a price. You have to share it with a friend or family.
Always a price.
Yeah. There's always a price.
The price is right.
You have to share it with a friend or family member. If you get something out of today's episode, interact with the video somehow. Share it, like it, comment. Don't do the thumbs down, though. I will find you.
We will find you.
Yeah.
There's a Marine on this episode. Who is that Marine today?
We have Edgar Menz with us, Captain, retired now. Edgar Menz.
That's correct.
Man, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, gentlemen. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, this is fantastic in that we are doing a series of Reunite the Brave.
Yeah.
It's an event by the Robert Irvine Foundation where we're bringing together the unit 1-5 Marines
Correct.
to group up, talk about their experiences, even have some of the current Camp Pendleton current soldiers
Marines.
are out on this as well. So they get to see and hear some of the combat stories that you guys had and instill the fear into these guys at a young age.
Absolutely. I think they look forward to the interaction with the vets. A lot of these guys, the ones coming in now, they hear stories about what, we did.
Yeah.
And, that's why some of these guys and gals join the military is to, serve in a way that not everybody gets to. And so they, just interacting with them, they really look up to us, and it's been great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were young children watching.
Some weren't even born.
Some weren't even born watching you
Which
guys do
is
the invasion.
crazy.
Or,
Yeah.
If you're born after 2000 at this point, you're 23.
That's crazy.
23 years old at 2000. What the heck?
And you talk about the average age of a young man or woman in service right now,
Like
starting
19?
off,
Yeah.
18, 19 years old.
Yeah. So born in 2005. Oh,
Oh,
God.
that's just crazy. Okay, so let's
Weird.
rewind it back to, from you being a current badass to
To pre-badass.
we don't know
really.
yet. We'll
Yeah.
hear your story and then we'll determine that.
Spoiler alert.
But what prompted you into joining the Marines? What directed you towards the military?
So, interesting story, really. Initially, I didn't plan on joining the Marine Corps. I always wanted to be in the Army. I wanted to be a Green Beret. Had a longtime family friend who was a Green Beret out of Carson and Bragg, and I really looked up to him, had a lot of respect for him. And so initially, I actually joined the Army. And but, a young man growing up in the 90s, I had a colored past, and there was a lot of stuff taken care of at a courthouse. And, some things went on with the Army recruiter that suddenly kind of soured my impression of the Army. Rewind a little bit, I had been approached by some Marine Corps recruiters prior to that, and I was just like, no, I'm not joining the Marine Corps. You guys are crazy. No,
These guys are
I do
nuts.
Full Metal Jacket and these other
Good reference.
Yeah.
I was
good
like,
reference.
I don't know. But then, so I was really worried about kind of the outcome. I did enlist in the Army under not such great circumstances. Well, then the Marine Corps reached out to me again, and I kind of told him what happened. And he's like, yeah, I really can't even help you, but I'll go check out. I'll go to the courthouse, right? Dude calls me at school. Like, I get called to the office, like, hey, come to the office. I got a phone call.
He got you arrested. Yeah.
No, he's like, dude, I'm
made
in the
it worse.
courthouse now. They know you by name down here. And I'm from a small town in Colorado.
Okay.
So I was like, okay. So long story short, I actually discharged from Army Dep and went to the Marine Corps, and they're like, we're going to do this the right way. Like, there's no point in starting off your career this way. So
Yeah.
we did that. And it really showed me something different. And it was that interaction where it made me really appreciate, like, okay, I think this guy really actually does care. So
Actually put in the effort for you.
so I joined the Marine Corps, and like I said, I always wanted to be a grunt, right? And initially, I was, when I joined the Army, they wanted to make me I think when I left BEPS, they were like, "You're going to be a forward observer." I was like, "Wait a minute, that's not what you told me." I was like, "You said I was going to go be a grunt, and then I go to A&S or something." He was like, "Yeah, no,
That's not going to happen. Damn it.
So Marine Corps didn't promise me anything. They just promised me the opportunity to be a Marine. So
Yeah, earn your way, right?
that's right.
Yeah, and what was your perception of the Marines at this point?
it really started to change a little bit as I interacted more with the recruiters, because I had to spend a lot of time with them in the enlistment process. And I just really, super professional, even the difference between the Marine recruiter, the Army recruiter, how they conducted themselves, how they looked in uniform, following through with things they said they were going to do. It was night and day, and I suddenly realized like I want to be like that guy, so it made me realize that it became more realistic. And then to top it off, right, like my dad, he's like, oh, you're going to be a Marine? Yeah, it's never going to happen. And I was like, all right, screw you,
This is
dude.
a commonality between, it's very interesting. We've talked to over 80 guests at this point, and Marines have a similar, kind of initiation where it's the father is always, you're never going to amount to anything. Yeah. And then, the special operations guys all live in a trailer park. It's just these commonalities we see.
Screw you, Dad. You don't know.
I'm going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, you don't know, Dad.
That begs the question sometimes. I wonder, are we being too soft with our children now, right? Because a little bit of that adversity, a little bit of that poke can really light the fire and inspire so much. Yeah. I'll prove you wrong. And you develop this resiliency from it that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So you think that was a huge part that inspired you to join the military? Was that reasoning, or?
I always knew I was going to go to the military. I always wanted to be in the military. But the Marine Corps, and I think to your point, to achieve something, it's one thing for you to, have an idea in your head that I'm going to achieve that.
Yeah.
It's another thing for somebody to tell you, you can't do that. Well, who the hell are you to tell me what I can and can't do? And plus, I look at I'd look at him and be like, you were never in. So I'm not going to listen to you.
Yeah. We had your Sergeant Major, right at the time, Converse, literally say that his dad, a Vietnam Marine at 6 years old, was like, you're never going to be anything.
Right.
And he remembered that forever, right?
Yeah, right.
That is just, that's shocking. And really just a commonality. But you became a Marine, obviously. And how did your perception of that Marine image change over time for you as you were going through your training?
Recruit training obviously makes you question your life choices sometimes.
Yeah.
But as you start understanding the process and you buy into it and realize what they're doing, and start going along with it, it really changes the idea in your head that, everybody likes to say people in the military are these, you're mindless robots, you're being brainwashed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really it. They're just, reprogramming in a sense. But stripping, it is stripping that self-identity.
It's kind of deprogramming and installing different software, if you really think about it. Yeah. Because you can't take the average civilian and put him in a situation like that. These rules don't apply. Yeah. We need to teach you the rules of this game, right?
And you gain you suddenly gain a much better respect for those that have gone and done it before.
Yeah.
And then you start putting in there, they didn't have the gear we have. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the nutrition that we have, and yet they made things happen. Yeah. So then you start to,
they made it work.
You learn history. You start learning about the guys that come before, and it's just, and then you develop the idea where, to your point, where if you start doubting yourself, right, or people are doubting you, you look left, you look right. Well, they're doing it. I can do this. Yeah. And I think that's what gets you through a lot of it. And it really changed from, thinking that Marines are crazy to just knowing that, like you said, just Marines are badass, and you've probably heard other guys say that, they love working with, infantry Marines in a combat situation. 'Cause it's just like, send me what can I kill today?
Yeah. Yeah. Get the job done.
Right.
Yeah. I always loved working with Marines when I was in the military. And it didn't matter if it was an infantry Marine or a support personnel. No matter what they did, they took pride in their job. I remember being down here at Pendleton, actually, doing an exercise. And one of the comm Marines came out. He had to help us load crypto for an exercise. Little E1, and just had so much passion for his job. Like, oh yes, sir, let me help you out with this. I can try these different things and see if this works. I'm like, this guy loves his job, and it's just loading radios. Like, these guys take pride. It was one thing that always stood out to me was the amount of pride you guys take. Yeah, it's important. It's important
in everything, right?
Yeah,
because then you hear that, right? They make do with what you got.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You know, I think there's some pride in that. Like,
yeah,
that is another reoccurring thing. Every episode for this Reunite the Brave, we've had that same thing. It's like make do with what you got, because the Marines don't get much of it, so they got to maintain that to the highest of standards.
Yep.
Got to be resourceful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's kind of dive in a little bit to what it looked like for deployment wise. You enlisted what year?
99.
99. Okay. So you got to see kind of the military unfold into its biggest change.
Absolutely.
After September 11th hit. And, you know, we've covered this topic quite a bit. And that initial reaction for you, I'm sure, was very similar to a lot of Marines in that we're going to war. Things have changed for me drastically. We're going to war.
Yep.
So what does that look like for you? What does that spin up look like?
You know, it's amazing the amount of changes, technological changes that the military went through, and you know, even the Marine Corps in those early years. Because coming out of the Clinton era, not a lot. The military was not the priority.
Yeah,
and you look back at some of the gear you had. Old flak jackets, M16 A2s, there's
LBVs,
RCOs, PAC 14, any of these laser sights or optics, that was not a thing on your weapon back then. It was, hey, I'm going to go to the range and I'm going to shoot iron sights, since you weren't getting anything else, right? And it's like the weapon I'm qualifying with rattles when you move it. It's all the bluing is gone. You can hear the buffer in there every time you pull the trigger.
Yeah, it's bright silver.
Yeah. So you go from that, and to a degree, you kind of look at your gear and you're like, do I have a lot of confidence that this is going to be, operable in combat when it's, I'm going to the range and qualifying and I'm breaking firing pins and to all of a sudden a bunch of money, things are being pushed into the military, not to mention everybody's pissed off.
Yeah.
These dudes, you went from, you go on a deployment, you go overseas, you go to Australia, you go to Guam, Thailand, you go to all these places, you're just having a blast. Like, oh, this is what it's like to be in the military, go overseas, have fun.
Yeah, deploying to Guam today. Oh, man.
See the world.
Yeah, exactly. Your next deployment, you're going, you're going to go to Tajikistan, you're going to go to Afghanistan, you're going to go to Iraq. It suddenly becomes very real, and it's nice because then you see people starting to take, not that they didn't take the training seriously, but now there's that added intensity, that added tempo, that added desire to be just that much better, at your job,
Well, shoot. I mean, that's what you train to do as a Marine. I mean, we all saw Full Metal Jacket. Right. That's the inspiration. So let's talk about that first deployment for you.
Yeah. With the first combat deployment.
Let's talk about the first combat deployment for you. So,
yes, we deployed for OIF-1, the invasion of Iraq. We were RCT-5. It was interesting. I still remember flying into Kuwait and getting on these buses that all I think of is like little hoopty circus buses. They little tassels and shit in the windows. And I was like, what is this?
Barely held together.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they're bussing Marines out to the desert. We show up to the desert. There is nothing. Like there's a few wooden floors on the deck. And then there's, a line of porta johns.
Yeah.
But other than that, there ain't nothing out there.
Just like they picked a random spot out in the desert.
They were like,
here. We're here.
Where are we?
We're home, boys.
Wait, is this a joke?
Yeah.
So we actually, when we first showed up out there, we set up 2-man tents and, we would go out to do training. We'd start small, squad level, platoon level, company. These big exercises, but every time we would come back, all of a sudden there'd be something built. Like, there'd be some actual big tents, or now there's a chow hall. Oh, now there's showers. What is happening?
CB's getting to work.
So it was going up quick.
Yeah.
And you got to see the building of that. That's interesting. We haven't really discussed that ever. And I think people just assume that you push a magic button and out spills the Harry Potter tent where everything is available for you.
Yeah. It's almost like a lot of people think that when troops show up or anybody shows up to theater, that logistics have already been there, like everything's in place.
No.
The reverse happened. Like we beat the logistics and we were living off of what we brought with us, and then everything.
Yeah. Well, someone has to defend that while it gets built as well.
Yep.
And how did that look? I mean, was it just desolate while the building was occurred, or did you guys have to fend off the wolves?
It was pretty desolate. I mean, like traveling PX, I don't even think we saw a PX for forever. All we hear was stories about like, some of the other camps or some of the big, their pizza, talking about Pizza Hut and all this. We're like, what is that? I'm just trying to get a can of Copenhagen.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe some dip, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe just some laundry soap.
A trash bag in an MRE box, pour some water in and swish it around.
Scrub away.
Yeah, that's that's a big thing too. Is you don't think about the suck fest in the field. Just a good shave. I would use the MRE heater, just to heat my water.
Heat the water.
Yeah,
I'm like cold meal or a hot shave.
Right. And then you're debating, right? Like after you've got that hot packet, do I shove it inside if it's a cold night or something, it's like, I'm going to just shove this in my flak.
Yeah.
Guaranteed third-degree burn, but it's worth it.
Right. I'm warm.
We've all been there.
The ingenuity is a lot like prison.
Yeah. So you guys get this facility starting to set up, starting to pop up. When are you guys operational, and what does that look like to start?
I think we were pretty operational within a couple weeks once we everything started coming. It was the first time I'd ever seen a 7-ton truck. Everything else here had been 5 tons, and all of a sudden there's these new trucks. I'm like, what is this? This is cool.
Where were they hiding these?
And all of a sudden you get contractors from Trigicon showing up. They're putting RCOs on webs. We're like, what is this?
God, happy day for them.
Right. And they're like, oh, designated marksman, get this. You're like, I want to be a designated marksman,
Yeah.
And I think we were, I hesitate to give a time frame. I think we were there for probably 2 months, if I remember correctly, maybe a month and a half before we got to, they had like a field day / talent show the day prior. And then all of a sudden we're sleeping, and then early in the morning, get up, we're moving. To go to the assembly area and staging points to get ready to go. So up until that point, we'd been training pretty hard. We were kind of limited on what we could do because, right, you don't have a lot of backup gear, and you don't want to trash the stuff you have. So, it was great. And I look back on it, just even some of the memories come back sitting here talking to you guys about it, because I don't really talk about it much.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing first and foremost. I know it's difficult at times, but how'd the rest of that deployment unfold?
So, once we got the order, we crossed. I cannot remember the day, to save my life, the day we actually crossed into Iraq, crossed the berm. I remember I've written down some stuff and memories as far as, how it felt. You're buttoned up in a vehicle with, I'd say 13, 14 other Marines. You're in mop suits,
Oh, that's right.
Full gear.
Forgot you guys were wearing mop gear.
I have to tell it, a lot of people that the series Generation Kill captures so much so well. I mean, there's some kind of outlandish stuff in it, but it really does,
the mop suits
capture
and the footballs.
Yes.
Playing football in the middle of nowhere.
We did that, right?
That's what I was imagining when you said we were out in the middle of the desert. I'm like, oh yeah, the scene when they're playing football in the middle of nowhere.
With mop suits on.
Mop suits.
And it was, interesting because it's dark. The track, there's only the red light on in there. You're seeing faces. People are nervous, and then all of a sudden, all you hear is the comm. The track's whining, and also we're in Iraq. And then shortly after, the vehicle, commander's up in his turret shooting Mark 19 and 50 at something. You can't see anything because you're all buttoned up. And the first time we got out of the tracks, that I did is we were meant to take, we were supposed to secure a quarry just north of the crossing point. And I remember getting out of the track and it was pitch black. You couldn't see anything except in the distance there was some, some of the oil lines the pipes had been burst and they were on fire. So it was super bright, just way off in the distance, but you couldn't see anything else. And then I was a 0351, which is an assaultman. So I had a pack full of C4 and, I'm carrying extra small rockets on my back, which is small. It's a 83 millimeter rocket launcher. It's reloadable, right? So I've got my gunner with me and we're trying to get to the top of this hill to see, get to our area where we're supposed to essentially cover. You can't get up the hill because the mop boots are just, you're sliding and going backwards and you can't see and you're disoriented.
You got all that weight.
Yes. It was a little frustrating.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right? And then you get up there, but then you put on your NVGs. The fires were so bright, it was flooding out your NVG.
Yeah.
So
couldn't see shit anyways.
Super disorienting.
Interesting to feel what the training environment is, and then to try to put that where it's never been done before. This is initial invasion.
Yep.
Everything's going to be just totally awry.
Yeah.
Yep.
Completely chaotic, I imagine, at all points.
It was. And, we got back in my next memory is, we went out and we had to set up on essentially an intersection. And we were providing overwatch over the desert. This is the first time I ever messed with thermals.
Okay.
And you're looking through the thermals and you just see groups of guys walking through the desert. And then you're just observing. And then that next morning we got in the tracks to go chase down a group of guys that somebody had called in, and the track drops us like 500 yards from these guys. We're like, what is going on? And then we're like bounding up to these guys. They're like, what's going on? And mop boots are flying off people's feet. It's just like, this is ridiculous.
And they're just watching you.
Yeah, we just
like bounding. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Watching you in the distance.
And then finally was like, so let's just move towards them tactically. Like, let's get up and weapons towards them and let's move. Thank you.
Oh, it's just like, some officer is like, all right, we've got to play this one by the book, boys.
I just remember kicking off. I kicked my boots off. I was just the mop boots. I was like, this is ridiculous. I felt like a clown show just going to they're probably like, this is what we ran from.
This is what we're going. Big bad Americans, huh?
But then we got
not your initial concept of what the war should look like at this point. You thought you were going to land and just start taking out the bad guys,
absolutely.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
But now you're it's a clown show.
Yeah.
Just imagining Normandy in your head and you're like, this is not.
No.
This is not.
I take it back because I totally forgot, because our first objective was a pumping station.
Okay.
After the next day, I remember this was the next day because this is the day that Lieutenant Childers was killed.
Okay.
And we were meant to go secure a pumping station. We dismount the tracks, and it's very eerie because Artie had hit this place. I mean, and as we're starting to move through, one of my buddies, Gross, steps on it was a piece of munition from a cluster. I don't want to say a cluster bomb, but this is a small little munition that we had dropped.
Okay.
So he steps on that, and that, when anytime anything happens as a unit's moving through something, all of a sudden everybody becomes alerted and kind of trying to figure out what's going on. We start moving to clear the area of this pumping station. The pumping station's actually off to our right. We're clearing the outbuildings to the pumping station. And as we're moving through, it's eerie because there's nobody there. But then there's truck. You come across there's a truck that still had the keys in the ignition, door open, cases of mines sitting out there. And then as we're moving through, got all this weight on my back. It looked like it just looked like the sand on the other side of this trench. And I jump, all of a sudden I'm up to my knees, and then I'm like a turtle because I start falling backwards because I wasn't expected to fall through this to my knees. And then I fall backwards. I'm like, oh, somebody give me up. Help. So my gunner Raleigh's coming over. He's like, what's wrong with you?
Well, what were you stuck in? I'm sorry.
It was just sand, like, but
Yeah,
it was ash actually. It'd been covered with sand, but it was like an ash pile.
Oh, so you just
it
sank right
sunk
down?
right into it, up to my knees, and just kind of fell over backwards. I was like, oh my gosh, here we go.
Help.
And you have all that gear that's just weighing you down.
Yeah.
And this, you got your sappy plates in, you got this pack on, you're fully loaded
down.
You're just like, no.
Yeah.
It's like quicksand, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So we got through that, and then we secured that, and then initially, this messenger on a motorcycle starts trying to race past our limit of advance. We stopped at the road, and all of a sudden, this dude just starts racing down the road in front of us. Well, I just remember looking down there because it didn't look like a guy on a motorcycle to me at first. It looked like a car. All of a sudden, down the line, people start shooting at it. And then, Marines, somebody starts shooting at somebody. Everybody's shooting at something.
Empty your whole mag, baby.
Right. And bike guy goes down, bike goes in the ditch off the road, whatever. We're not paying attention. I swear, it felt like a couple minutes passed. All of a sudden, we look down. There's a dude standing in the middle of the road with his hands up. It was the dude on the motorcycle. And we're just like, did we all miss that guy?
Okay.
And it turns out, no, he'd actually taken a few hits, but and it
Just
found
a
out
few.
later he was
How
actually.
many rounds do you think were fired that night?
I mean, he was at that moment probably a few hundred.
He took a couple rounds.
He took a
1%
few.
hit rate. Nice
I
job,
tell you,
guys.
I got him. It's accuracy by volume.
Yeah. He who shoots the most, the
Right.
fastest.
Exactly.
That's a topic for another day. But
Right.
usually you go black on one squirter. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So they took him, and then it was shortly after we were actually in the middle of getting ready to load back up onto the tracks, when then two more vehicles with armed individuals came from the actual pumping station and opened up as we were actually moving out of the defense back into the vehicles to leave, and that's when Lieutenant Childers got shot.
Okay.
So,
Um,
what was paint that scene a little bit for us, if you don't mind.
so I was in the track already when it happened. I had the 51s because I was the 51 section leader. So we initially had been set up, and then I had the SMAs along with a machine gun set up in the defense. Well, when they were ordered to load up, we picked up and moved back to the track. So I'm actually in the track.
Okay.
And then the first memory that I have, all of a sudden people are yelling, and the guns are just, the track, he's swinging the turret, and then you hear all the fire outside. And I mean, they put a lot into these vehicles. And next thing you know, that's when you hear, I think he was 2 actual, because he was the platoon commander. I don't think it was second. It must have been second platoon. Yeah,
Okay.
It was second platoon. And that he was hit. And it was right under the body armor. And that was devastating for us because he played we can get into that maybe later, but he played a big role in actually where I ended up later on as far as my career.
Okay.
But we were heartbroken, angry. He was a great leader, great Marine. He embodied what you'd want in an officer.
Sure.
And I mean, and it's not like, he didn't go down, moving away from the target. I mean, he went down engaging the target.
Yeah.
So
In the fight. Yeah.
yeah.
And I imagine there's zero medevac plan for you guys at this point. It's self-rescue, I imagine.
It was, the corpsmen did what they could,
Yeah.
But he passed before they could even. At that point, it was an Amtrak that was designated to move them to a certain location.
Yeah. No amount of time.
No, he died right there.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, but understandable. Yeah.
So, I think that was a real turning point for a lot of us.
Eye opener, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I bet that lit the fire.
Mm-hmm.
I bet that lit the fire on a lot of you.
Absolutely.
Mm.
If that may have shaped how we did things later on, but
Sure.
at no point did vehicles ever get near us again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Lots to learn, especially from the first. The first one to go is always the eye-opening experience. You feel a little less invincible.
Yeah, and I had I had a very close encounter with that myself. So
Yeah, and was this the same deployment?
same deployment. Yeah, this is once we got to Baghdad, so it took us a couple weeks to get to Baghdad.
I mean, you guys fought your way through to Baghdad, right?
We had a few. There was a few times where we worked through some things to get there. That's for sure. And we initially, after we got into the palace, we got a new task to go. Saddam's in this.
Mm-hmm.
At least is the way I understood it. Right, Saddam's in this suspected in this mosque in downtown Baghdad.
Okay.
And so we, this is after Gunny Bohr. I don't know if you guys had heard about Gunny Bohr. He was our company guns for Alpha Company. And, seemed like I'm going to invade a country in soft skin Humvees. Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah.
And Gunny Bohr, as we were moving through Baghdad to get to the palace, he was killed. And the only thing I remember about that is once we got into the palace, I think it was either Charlie or Bravo had already taken the palace. And so once we got there, we got retasked to the tracks. We didn't even get out. We turned them, went out the palace, and we're headed downtown Baghdad to this mosque. And once we got there, got out, it was a huge, downtown square, right? Multi-story buildings on each side. The mosque was to my
bizarre type area.
But it was open.
So completely open.
Yeah, okay. It was huge. At least that's how I remember it, right? And we started taking fire from the buildings. I remember looking down the tracks, and you see the tracks, turrets turn, and the marks and the 50s are going off. They're engaging the building across the street. They started getting contact from our direct front as the tracks were facing. And I was looking around like, what's going on? And there was an ammo truck or something on fire that finally exploded. And I was always on air watch, and I always stood towards the front of the track because there was a exhaust pipe there, and it was warm at night. So when you're up on air watch, you're warm. So I remember I take my eyes off my little sector there for a little bit because of this explosion. And when I look back, something had changed. I couldn't what the heck? There was this wall that surrounded the mosque, and then there was an area where there was a door that went into kind of like it would remind you of like a guard shack, but I don't know what it was. Well, then I saw the back of this RPG launcher in the doorway. I'm like, oh crap. I start engaging with my weapon. I pull a grenade, pull a pin, chuck it down there. It goes through the door, out the back door, and explodes under this truck that's in there. So obviously I don't get him because I'm still shooting, right? My M16, all of a sudden I get a double feed. It's down. So I'm yelling like Raleigh, and I'm trying to get this other grenade out. The stupid button on this thing it's stuck. I can't get it open. You don't have enough to grab to really wrench on it. It just slides out of your hand. Nobody can hear me because everything's going crazy. But Lieutenant Horton, who was in the TC in front of me, he finally heard me and he understood what I was saying. So he pulls a grenade. I remember watching it. Dink, bonk, 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 goes in. I duck my head. Next thing I know, I'm down. I'm in the track. People are screaming. I'm disoriented. Everybody's yelling. I'm hit. I remember very distinctly. It was like quiet in my head. And I just remember looking at myself, checking everything.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I'm good. Went down there, cleared my weapon out. And New Miller was on the radios. And what had happened was an RPG. That guy, when we ducked, he came out and fired that RPG off. And it went right into the track. And there's a seam behind the TC and the rest of the track. It came through the EK armor, went through the track, hit the radios, blew up in the radios, and there was a can of smoke grenades in there.
Yeah.
Blew those. but the engine compartment took most of the shot.
Okay.
Neumiller had taken, like, the blast went past the back of his head, so he got shrapnel in the back of his head.
Okay.
Nobody died.
And you were unscathed.
I didn't know until later, but I had a little bit of shrapnel in my leg. But yes, virtually, I mean, I operated the whole day.
So him throwing that grenade essentially saved your life.
Absolutely.
From that RPG coming right by your head.
Well, I don't even know if he would have launched it, but it just, I don't know. Because who knows if he had to come out and shot it when he did, because the fuel tank's on that side too. What if he had put it through the fuel tank? I mean, we've seen images of what happened to tracks in Nasiriyah. Luckily that didn't happen to us. I had small rockets. We had AT-4s in there. We had a Bangalore kit in the bottom of this thing. Who knows what would have happened?
Yeah, that's all thermite, right?
Yeah.
So did that guy disappear with the grenade or what?
He was on the ground. Yeah. So once I got back up, I stood back up, and that was my oh shit moment.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden I couldn't see. Like once the air hit my eyes from all the smoke and everything that was in the track, I couldn't see shit. And everything going on around you, you're like, I could freaking die right now.
Yeah. Like this is not good.
And it was so hard. I was fighting so hard to keep my eyes open because they were just burning.
Yeah, filled with soot and shit.
Yeah. And those smoke grenades are not.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
And then we got all of a sudden the track wasn't disabled. But talking to guys, the track behind us, they thought we were dead because of everything just billowing up out of it.
Yeah.
But nobody in that track died.
Wow.
And we got off of it, and shortly after, dismounted, gained entry into the mosque, and it was about an 8-hour battle that we were in downtown Baghdad.
Wow.
And that really changed a lot of us, I think. And then,
sure.
I think it's those moments and those experiences that really shaped what they did, and later on in Fallujah, Ramadi, Sangin, things like that.
Yeah.
So,
well, the way you guys responded to being the very first.
Yeah.
Like you guys were the first ones there. I mean, you guys really set the tone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I like to, I feel, you have a story like nobody, it was my, opportunities at 51 to actually do what I trained for, using shape charges to blow stuff up. And, because once we got in there, these guys, there was a bunch of armed guys in there, and, they were locking doors behind them, and, these Moss, there's 30. Well, I had a bag of C4. So, we, took a little of experimenting on one door, but then
you learn every door.
You learn every door, and then there's never too much.
Not with shape charges.
Yeah. Overkill is underkill.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that was a rough deployment for you, obviously.
Yeah,
shaped who you were as a Marine. Let's talk about your transition into, like, when did you decide to be an officer?
So I had been thinking about it, but this kind of goes back to, a lot of people have self-doubt about their own potential, right? Like me growing up, I was never really the smart kid. I never really, if it wasn't baseball or something, I didn't excel at it. I was a mediocre student. And I just never really thought that was an opportunity, right? But Lieutenant Childers, I had lost, it's not, I don't want to make a sob story, but my dad died, shortly, my first year in, and then my brother, who I was really close with, died. And then I was home on leave for his funeral, and I got really angry because I'd asked for I asked for more time, and they're like, no, you need to come back. So I was pissed. I was angry.
Yeah.
And we were out in the field doing some training, and we're doing EPW handling stuff. And one of my Marines, I'd finally, I was just angry. And they were messing off. They weren't taking it serious. And so I took him down, I took him down. So basically this is how you handle EPWs. We're not playing games. Lieutenant Childers saw it, and he was pretty upset that I did that to one of my Marines. And that's when I started yelling. I was like, I told him I didn't care what he thought. I didn't have any faith and confidence in them. I thought they were pieces of shit. I didn't care. And instead of the response of, well, okay, Corporal, I'm just going to smash you now and I'm going to NJP you. And he knew something was wrong. And I think that's a sign of a good leader. Like, okay, this isn't how he normally acts.
And what year is this?
This was a year before we deployed.
Okay.
So this was 2002.
Which is even more recognized, like that needs to be recognized a little bit more, because 2002, we were in the mentality of rub some dirt on it, PTS doesn't exist as well.
Right.
So that is a stellar leader at this point. He's
absolutely.
recognizing an issue in his own guy.
Yep.
Because most officers, especially Marine officers, are going to jump down your throat.
Absolutely.
And you're just out of here.
Yeah. Yep.
So he kind of recognizes this issue in you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he takes me aside. And he's like, "Hey, man, what's going on, man? I'm like, this isn't you." And he wasn't my platoon commander, but I was always attached to his platoon. And I really respected that. And he took the time to figure it out, and I explained to him what was going on. And he helped me through it. And I really respected him for it after that. And I made a challenge to myself to, you find people like, this is who I want to, these are the people I want to emulate. These are the people I don't want to emulate. Right. And I tried to, humble myself and try to be more like him. You start thinking, how would somebody handle this? And so one, seeing a good leader, a good officer, somebody that you can have faith in. And then as we go through the deployment, Lieutenant Horton really stood out. And I ended up being attached to his platoon all the time. And him, Gunny Kinzer and I like to say we were pretty close. I learned a lot from them. So I let them know, I let Lieutenant Horton know, like, they're the reasons that I became an officer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I really decided, I made the effort, and as I improved, I became a better Marine. I got promoted to sergeant. I had people saying, people come, "Hey, I really appreciate you doing this or doing that." And I finally said, "Hey, I'm going to, why not? I'm going to put in for this package and see what happens." The process took a long time, but when I was on recruiting, I left 5th Marines and I was a canvassing recruiter, which that has its own challenges, right?
Sure, yeah.
Towards the end of it, I submitted, and then I was a CAT platoon sergeant out in 3-4, which is combined anti-armor teams.
Okay.
And a buddy of mine calls me. I'm on the way back from the field. My cell phone rings. He's like, "Dude, we got it." I was like, "Oh, so we both got accepted for this commissioning program." And so, yeah, from then on, I ended up, probably about 7 months later, ended up in Newport, Rhode Island, going through a prep school.
Okay.
Boost was the program I did, which they don't have anymore, which is a shame. They should bring it back. It's a great tool to create officers.
So is this taking a prior enlisted and accelerated course?
So if you don't have any, no college background, maybe you weren't the best student, it's an opportunity to learn how to be a student again, get some of those base requirements out of the way for a degree.
Okay.
The professors there were outstanding, awesome. And it just prepares you for the college life.
Okay.
And did that. And you learn from people there as well, right?
Sure.
And
did you get out of the Marines?
No.
To go to school? So they had you?
Yeah, I did that year active duty. So it's just like any, they have what's called Marine Enlisted Commissioning Program, MECEP.
Okay.
And Boost, your active duty pay, benefits, you're a full-time student at a university. You belong, we belong to the NROTC unit at the university. You have to go to a college with an NROTC or it's affiliated with a college with NROTC. Mm-hmm. And so you still participate in their programs. But go to college.
Great program.
The great thing about the Marine Corps is, they don't care what you get a degree in. Just get a degree. The Navy cats, they have a little bit, they're more focused on
engineering,
sciences.
Yeah.
So how did that translate for you, that enlisted skill set and becoming an officer and going back to your unit? So you went back to 1-5, correct?
No, I've never.
You never returned
been back. No.
Okay.
I left there. I became once I got commissioned. Mm-hmm. I did OC or TBS in Quantico, and I became an aviation supply officer.
Aviation.
Yep. Aviation
Incredible.
supply.
Good choice.
Yeah. Right. SPC, my SPC, who they're the officer that's in charge of you there. He was really shocked. He's like, "Men's really aviation supply?" I was like, "Absolutely, sir." I look over what they're doing at IOC. I'm like, "No, I'm good. I don't need that."
I don't need to know
Yeah.
that.
So you spent the rest of your career in aviation.
Yep, aviation logistics. The last 10 years, I did aviation supply.
And what did you love about it?
So the thing I like, one thing is you're deployed, you gain a huge respect for the aviation community because everything they do is in support of ground units.
Yeah.
And you see, once you're on that side, you see how much time and work goes into getting a bird up, whether it be an F-18 or a Cobra, getting that bird ready to go support the warfighter on the front line.
Yeah.
Those maintenance Marines, those ordnance Marines, they're working nonstop, to get that bird ready for that pilot to go blow some shit up.
24 hours a day.
And it gave me a new perspective because, a lot of the ground, combat arms guys are like, "Oh, pogues,
Yeah.
we're the badasses."
You definitely need them.
And I was, I have mad respect for them because, what? They go in, they do their job, they do it well. And to be able to, to at least be in a role where, you can still support, the warfighter.
Yeah.
It's a great feeling. And, they deserve that, they deserve the best support possible. So
it's incredible. It's incredible. What a career. And taking that combat experience into aviation, that's got to be a different edge too, because you get to see both sides of it.
Yeah.
And that just the experience alone creates such a good leader. So you got out of the military. What year?
I just retired so I'm officially retired 1 June this year.
Almost retired.
Had my retirement ceremony.
You're almost
I've been
there.
away. Yeah, almost there.
Incredible. So how did you hear about Reunite the Brave 1-5?
Absolutely great. The healing power of reconnecting became very evident to me when I participated in an Alpha Company reunion 2 years ago, put on by Ryan Ackerman. And in participating in that, it brought back a lot of memories and things I hadn't really thought about. But the joy, what it did for me as a person was life-changing. So then I became involved with planning the 20-year reunion. And as we started diving into how big this was going to be and what people wanted, it became a very daunting task. Well, then through connections, we had made contact with Charles Williams, and suddenly he was like, "Hey, I'm moving into the Robert Irvine Foundation. We're starting these programs. This is what we're doing."
Yeah.
And it was a game changer for us because now when somebody's talking about a battalion size event, it's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
But you're in logistics. So
Make it happen, right? Absolutely.
Let's get our loggies here. Yeah.
So once we were informed of the foundation and what they were doing, it was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And they want to help us. Like this is not just help, but honestly, we wouldn't be able to do this event without it.
Yeah.
Without who?
The Robert Irvine.
I'm sorry.
Exactly.
You got to look at the camera while you're doing it.
The Robert Irvine Foundation.
Yeah.
Robert Irvine.
Little finger guns.
Reconnecting the Brave. Right?
Yeah.
So, which I love that as well because, right, when we think about, is reunion the right term for what we do? I don't think reunion's strong enough because it's, what we're trying to do is change people's lives. We're trying to prevent the suicides. We're trying to,
unite.
Yes.
Reunite.
Reunite, reconnect.
Yeah.
And maybe get those people because you suddenly like we've had people that we've lost just due to suicide, the feelings of hopelessness, loneliness, the isolation. Those are the things that we're trying to prevent.
Yes.
And get people to realize that you're not alone. There are people here that want to help you. you have support. And I think that's, the great thing about this foundation is that has made that possible.
Well, the proof is right there. All you have to do is show up. If you think otherwise, show up to one of these events and just note how you feel, because you're going to feel different. If you think it's one way, show up and attend these things, reunite with the people that you thought you had lost time with. I mean, you go right back into it like nothing ever happened, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like the time hasn't actually passed.
No, and you see them out there,
Yeah.
and it's as they're checking in, they're quiet. You're like, oh, kind of everybody's checking out. Well, all of a sudden you get them all in that room and they're together, and it's
5 minutes later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, there is a common misconception when it comes to these reunites or reconnections or reunions, whatever word you want to look at, and people have a tendency to, from the outside looking in, to think, oh, it's just a party. They're just getting drunk and blah, blah, blah. That's not the case.
It's deeper.
It really just takes out that isolation factor.
Yeah.
When you get out of the military and shut yourself off to the world, sometimes you see people gone for a decade.
Yeah.
And that is just the worst thing you could do.
Mhm.
So the only way, in our experience, and why we have this show, is you need to be surrounded by like-minded individuals who understand your story so that you could peel back the layers of who you are. And that's what we see at these reunites.
Mhm. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it prevents suicide. I mean, it really does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, you wish I don't say wish. It's taken time for things like these to evolve and come along. So, and you in your heart, you would have hoped, those guys that you'd lost due to suicide, that we would have been able to do something for them back then. And I think that's our mission now, right? We want to prevent that because these are our brothers.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you made it through. Some of these guys have been through, 5 combat deployments, and then only to come home and lose them in a DUI, lose them to suicide, lose them to health issues. It's heartbreaking. And every time one of them goes, it's like a piece of you goes, right?
Every time.
These are great opportunities to, at least have that bond that you did, because you always hear about, people ask the questions, would you go back and do it again?
Yeah.
And guys are like, absolutely. And it's not necessarily the experience of what happened. It's the people you were with when it was happening.
Every time. And I think we all fall back onto that, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's why we do it, for the men.
And that's why this is special, because, out in everyday life, people like that are few and far between.
Yes.
That's it.
But here it's like, can't throw a rock without hitting one.
Yeah, they're all great people.
Yes.
Yeah. It's unfortunate that these things have to be written in blood, or we have to have such terrible things happen for us to start doing events like these. And I wish that we would have started earlier, but now we're doing them, and hopefully the next generation can take a note. Hey, these are the methods that we used to bring everyone back together, to stop, to help prevent veteran suicide, to help reunite these people and get those feelings and associations back, because it's so important. And I'm just hopeful that it's something that'll continue throughout the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for being a part of it. We don't want to keep you from the actual event that is happening right now.
Absolutely.
Right meow.
Reunite the Brave 1-5 Marines. Thank you so much for showing your story and being so open. I know it's difficult, and sometimes it stirs up some emotions. So now that you have this talk through, go out there and support the Marines.
Yeah, absolutely, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. And I thank you for your support.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, Edgar. This has been the Medevac Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching today. If you got something out of today's episode, which I know you did, share it with a friend or family member, get that out there, and then head on over to the Medevac Podcast Instagram. It's the easiest way to get in touch with myself and David. Drop us a line, DM.
Follow
comments.
us on YouTube.
Yeah, do the YouTubes.
Follow us on all the other platforms as well.
Yeah, YouTube and Instagram, primary ones, or medevacpodcast.com. You can see more about the Robert Irvine Foundation there, donate direct, and watch all the episodes. That's pretty much it. We'll see you next time.
Until next time, take care.